2001, A Space Odyssey, from one of the most revered directors of all time, Stanley Kubrick. I want to start this little discussion off with you guys telling me, how did you come to this movie? Do you remember?
I remember seeing a documentary, a Star Wars documentary, and it talked about the inspiration from 2001. And so that's when I went back and watched 2001. And it was specifically talking about special effects, not thematically, but it was talking about special effects.
Hmm. How about you, Ben? This came
So
out decades before you were born.
yeah,
Many. I mean, it was one decade before me and Dave were in the world, but
yeah. So I remember it was in my college days. I went to visit my sister, and she had it playing at her apartment, but she switched it before I even knew what it was called. But I was like, "Oh, that's cool." She's like, "No, that's boring. I'm not watching that." Eventually, I figured out I had to like kind of do like a lost media thing and figure out which one it was. And, surely it wasn't that hard, but I figured out, okay, it's 2001. And you know me, Scott, I wanted to read the book before I
sure.
continued watching the movie.
I'm glad you
So
gave up reading Dune so we could finally watch it, though.
yeah, that's gonna be
So
another
you did read the book then before you saw it?
yes. And so it's funny because in the book they go as far as Saturn, but I think in the film they only go as far as
Yeah.
Jupiter. And
Yeah, in the book it's Saturn.
yeah, what's interesting about, and I believe it was Stanley Kubrick approached Arthur Clarke, the author of the book, who he's an absolute legend of science fiction literature.
Hmm.
I think he approached him. He said, I want you to write a novel that I can base a movie on. And it's
Hmm.
interesting. I don't know if that was just like a reflection of the time because people read more, that novels that were adapted into films would get more traction as films. But
Yeah,
but
that is kind of a weird
that
thing because,
he would solicit Arthur Clarke to write the book so he could make a movie on it.
right. I think
But
most people assume that it was a book first, but the book that inspired 2001 is another Arthur C. Clarke book called The Sentinel.
Yeah.
And and then Arthur C. Clarke wrote the book called 2001 either during or after production of the movie. And I think a lot of people, when they're trying to understand the movie, they use the book as a guide, and it kind of helps a bit.
oh yeah, absolutely. That was one of my takeaways too. Is like, man, I'm so glad I read the book because there's a lot here going on that I just would not understand otherwise. Um, but
I'm going
yeah,
to attempt to synopsize this for the audience. You guys jump in whenever you feel necessary. I'm going to try not to take too long doing it, but 2001 is not an easy movie to synopsize.
right.
I think it's basically three movies in one. The first movie is on ancient primitive times when man is still in like an ape man and doesn't know how to use tools yet. I don't even think we had fire at that point. And they're just kind of living and surviving. And then all of a sudden, this monolith appears. This dark rectangular object that you see on screen right now appears to these apes, and it drives them nuts. They're screaming and yelling, and it's aggravating them somehow. One of them touches it. Lo and behold, the next scene we see is one of these apes playing with bones of some animal, and it starts smashing one of the bones on the ground, and it starts realizing that it has an impact, that this bone can be a weapon. And then the ape people start using bones to kill animals with, and that's when they start eating meat. And the animals start dying that they're eating, and the monkey man throws this big bone up into the air, and in the classic transition that everyone remembers from this film, the bone becomes a spaceship circling the earth. And then we're entering the second, the second part of the movie, where there's this man, a government official of some kind, who's traveling via Pan Am, which used to be a major airline and isn't now, so the guest's wrong about the endurance of the Pan Am brand. But there's a Pan Am like space shuttle flight to the moon that this guy's on. And I think if there's one part of the movie I think Stanley Kubrick overindulges in, it's this part where we're like seeing how we can fly to the moon on a space shuttle. Granted, this movie was made before we landed on the moon, so maybe it was just more fantasy and spectacle. But by the time we were all born, we'd walked on the moon. So seeing people travel on a shuttle just isn't all that futuristic anymore. But anyway, he gets to the moon. There's this group of people that are asking him, "Oh, why are you here? Have you heard about this mysterious thing going on the moon? What is it? It sounds like it's a really big deal." And he's like, mums the word, "I can't say anything." Or actually, I think he pretends he doesn't know anything. But then he's in a meeting with other officials on the moon, and they've discovered either another monolith or the same monolith that was there with the monkeys in the first part of the movie. And this official like meets with a lot of other astronauts in front of the monolith, and it emits a signal, like a screeching sound that like causes them all pain. Then we cut to a spaceship called Discovery heading towards Jupiter because the monolith signal that it was emitting, and I'm not even sure you get all of this from watching the movie. Some of this is from the book and from other explanations. The monolith was sending a signal to Jupiter. And when they figured that out, they decided they needed to send a ship to Jupiter. So that's where our stars, two people with top billing in the movie, Keira Dulé, and I can't remember the other guy's name. They're on this Discovery vessel headed to Jupiter, and they're the only humans conscious on the ship. I think there are like 3 or 4 other humans in cryosleep. And this computer called HAL, HAL, it stands for something. And actually, HAL is all one letter off from IBM,
Yes.
which was a known computer thing at the time. So that was kind of clever. So HAL is their automaton, like machine, the computer, like Star Trek to talk to the computer. It controls everything aboard the ship. It gets to where the humans, Dave and I can't remember the other guy's name. Do you guys remember the other guy's name? Dave and Frank? I can't remember.
Yeah.
They don't trust Hal because Hal makes a mistake on something technical. And as soon as they realize, oh my goodness, Hal is fallible, I don't think we can trust Hal anymore. They go and have a meeting about it inside a little space vessel, not realizing that Hal can see them and he can read their lips and he can understand that they're planning to shut him down. And in the interest of his own self-survival, Hal then sabotages them. When they go out to fix something outside the spaceship, he kills the other guy, who's not Dave. I can't remember his name. And then when Dave tries to rescue him and bring his friend back into the ship, Hal won't let them in. So Dave has to find a way into the ship, and he does. And when he gets in there, he shuts Hal down, and Hal's terrified. He's like begging for his life, as a computer voice does. And then he like recites a sad little poem as his language gets more and more rudimentary until he finally dies. And then the ship arrives at Jupiter. And the monolith is there floating in the air. And this is when Stanley Kubrick gets all trippy as hell, because for the next, like, I want to say it's 10 minutes. Maybe it's not that long, but it feels that long. There's just like a tunnel of lights that Dave in his little miniature space vessel goes through. Just a tunnel of weird psychedelic lights and music and weird little landscapes. Until finally Dave arrives in this weird, pristine, white room that, so far as I can understand, is an alien-made room that they want him to feel comfortable in. And they're just kind of observing him there, perhaps. But this is not really made clear in the movie. Anyway, he starts aging. I don't know if he actually ages quickly or if we're just seeing him at different points through time. But Dave grows very old, all by himself in this weird little white room that may be a zoo. That's kind of my interpretation. And right upon his death, lying in the bed, he sees the monolith standing at the foot of the bed, and he reaches for it. And then at the end of the movie, Dave turns into this baby, like an embryo in a glowing sack. And then the baby gets big, and it's like bigger than Earth, and it's moving toward the Earth, and it's looking at the Earth. And then the movie's over. How'd I do, guys?
That pretty well sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, what the hell's this movie about? What is Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke trying to say with this book and movie? Which one of you has the theory?
Yeah, so there's a couple of moving parts. Touching on Hal's malfunction, which it's interesting because I almost want to say it's tangential to what the overall message of the story is, and kind of the story of the monolith and mankind and things like that. If anything, like because from what I recall, the reason why Hal malfunctions is because Command was lying to the astronauts about something. I think it was about their destination, something about what they're doing there, and that affected his programming to the point where his logic was, if I remove the astronauts, I don't have the conflict of lying to them anymore. And that was why that was solving that problem.
Yeah.
I can't remember what Command was trying to hide from them though.
Well, I actually just watched the movie in preparation for this episode, and they don't. The movie actually doesn't say what they're trying to hide. Only the nature of the mission, like why they're going to Jupiter, is what
Right.
what
I
they're
think
trying to
that's what
hide,
it was.
but not why.
Yeah.
And
So
I don't. The crew's not expendable or anything. Yeah, I don't remember. But to me,
well, they're not
it's
explicitly expendable, but apparently they
Right.
are expendable.
Well, like that was just part of Hal's malfunction, where the logic was like, if I remove the crew, I remove
Yeah.
the having to lie to them and the conflict that was creating in his programming. So, but yeah, so the whole thing though is like the idea of transcendence, I guess, when you kind of evolution of technology is that we'll create androids and then we'll be able to put our minds inside of androids. We'll transcend flesh that way, but even beyond that, we'll transcend the android state. So the baby at the end, from my understanding, is supposed to represent that final stage of transcendence, and he becomes a star child, which is essentially like the race that created the monoliths and was seeding them throughout the galaxy to bring the species such as the human race to fruition. From my understanding, that's
see.
what it is.
I also think it could, since it's a baby, since the image is very distinctly a human infant embryo baby thing. It's almost like the technology that the monolith helped inspire the apes to get to develop the first tools using bones to kill people. And then it also kind of led to the creation of AI, of HAL, the computer.
Mhm.
And if you consider the fact that the weapons that the apes used were used to kill people and that's bad, and you consider that AI was fallible and that it could also create death in its own way, that maybe the space baby was the monolith saying, okay, you guys have screwed it up way, way bad. We need to start over. So now you're a baby again.
Mhm.
Like you've
Well,
evolved and it didn't work out. I don't know.
yeah,
I definitely agree it's about transcendence.
like
But what's the
rebirth
monolith
too.
doing?
Yeah,
So Kubrick and Clarke are saying that humankind, at least in this story, have been helped to the next level of evolution by this monolith when needed.
right. Like the monolith is basically like, think of it like Prometheus is fire in Greek mythology, where it imparted knowledge to the apes, and then they learn how to use tools, and that's progressed all the way to this level we are in 2001 in the story, where we have spaceships and things, and then the next stage is this transcendence to star child state of the big baby. So
Yeah, I don't know where we go from there.
yeah, no, I think that's supposed to be like the final. Which then they had to 2010 sequel.
Yeah. I don't remember it being a very compelling movie though, but I should see it again.
Yeah,
I whenever I've watched this movie, because I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now, like at least 10 years apart. It's not the kind of movie that you can rewatch too often, because it does have a lot of languidly paced things for dramatic cinematic effect. I think it's definitely worth seeing in a cinematic environment, on a big screen with good sound. Once, twice. It's not a repeat casual television watching kind of a movie. But I've seen it each time thinking I would understand it more. And I think maybe to some degree I have, but it also raises more questions the more I watch it.
yeah,
So I was happy to see somewhere that Clarke and Kubrick agreed If anyone ever figures this movie out, then we failed at our jobs.
Yeah.
They did not want it to make absolute total sense.
Good. That's
There's
good.
definitely a sense of cosmic mystery to this, but yeah.
But it feels like it means something. It
Yeah.
so very much feels like it means something. Like emotionally, viscerally, on some level, when you watch it, it's like a religious experience, you know? But you can't quite like put it into words, like what it means. I don't know. But I was going to also say the visual effects are, like Dave said earlier, this movie and Blade Runner hold up in ways that a lot of other films from 60s, 70s, and 80s don't, because it has no optical compositing, meaning there was no green screen or blue screen work. All of the visual effects in 2001 are in camera. They either had mirrors reflecting models or paintings directly into the lens, or they rewound the film and exposed it over and over again with different parts of the film getting different little pieces of the image, so that they never had to composite anything. When you composite stuff, you get the Star Wars effect, which I love Star Wars, but the optical compositing, the green screen and blue screen stuff in those movies really stands out. You
Yeah,
notice it.
it leaves a telltale little halo around everything that travels.
Yep. There's none of that in 2001 or
No.
in Blade Runner. And those two movies really stand the test of time technically because of that, I think. So even if you don't like what the movie's about, I think you can at least appreciate how nice it looks and how well the imagery really holds up. Also notably, Alex North wrote a score for this film that was completely rejected by Stanley Kubrick, and instead he used a lot of classical music. He uses Strauss for a lot of the ecclesiastic moments, and he uses creepy Ligeti music for whenever the monolith's on screen. That stuff is unsettling, and I know it drives some people crazy because it's just like, oh, it's like wailing voices and like atonal, like droning instruments. Like, it's pretty creepy. And then he uses some Khachaturian, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think it's Khachaturian for some of the like more somber funereal type moments. But it's a very famous soundtrack that a lot of people discovered some of this classical music by watching this movie. It's kind of like Fantasia almost in its marriage of visuals and well-known music. It won the Oscar for visual effects, and it was nominated for director, original screenplay, and art direction. And it didn't do as well as MGM was hoping when it was originally released. But a lot of hippies that smoke pot discovered it.
Yeah.
And at least anecdotally, the legend is that the movie had staying power. Like, it was in theaters for over a year because hippies started going to it on a regular basis. Like, they would drop acid before the show started or during the intermission, and it would hit in time for that psychedelic tunnel of lights sequence. And apparently that was all the rage. So that's my thoughts on 2001. Do you guys want to add anything to the conversation on a deep, kind of a deep movie, but also one that's open-ended on purpose so that we're not supposed to completely understand it?
I will say that the first time I watched this movie, which would have been probably in the early 80s, I hated it, absolutely despised it. And I have, it's one of the few movies where I hated it so much that I only had, there was nowhere to go but up in subsequent viewings. And I've probably watched it. I think this last time I watched it this past week, and my appreciation of it has probably gone up by 10-15% every time I watch it.
Yeah.
And I with a lot of movies, my appreciation of it, if nothing else, it's saved by the visual aspects, and I think on that alone, this 2001 is amazing to me. But you know, I'm going to have a really hard time giving it a score, giving it a. I would almost have to do it on the basis of different things, you know, on,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you don't have to give it a score if you don't want to, because some people think it's silly to try and do that. But when it
Yeah,
comes
I
to
may
just
not.
your own enjoyment or appreciation of the movie, that's what I kind of try and
Yeah,
relate it to. But I'm like you. Every time I see it, I like it a little more. I appreciate that it makes me think, that it makes me want to try to figure it out,
it
and
does.
it
Yeah,
is a visceral experience.
yeah.
So if you want it all wrapped up with a bow at the end, you ain't gonna get that. No, 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 no. You ain't gonna get that.
Something that I thought was interesting that I hadn't thought of before when I watched it most recently was that the special effects not only hold up, but the set design holds up well too. And what was interesting about that is that when you watch it, a lot of it is very much, you know, grounded in the 60s when it was made, like the hairstyles and some of the clothing and things like that. And so when you watch it, the set design is so good that when you see the actors, it's almost like retro futuristic.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of weird because the everything else, you know, the interiors of the ships or the ship and the computers and all that looks very contemporary. It looks like it could exist right now.
I
But
think they call it, I think they call it NASA punk now.
yeah, NASA punk, yeah, and but like the hairstyles and a lot of the wardrobe is very
Still
much
a
in the
little
60s.
dated.
Yeah,
Yeah, still a little dated. Yesterday's vision of tomorrow.
and it's funny
That's
because
always fun.
I've seen some TV shows and at least one TV show that I can think of. I think it's a Disney show that is very retro futuristic, and I think they may have been inspired by 2001. I don't know, because again, a lot of the tech was very current, but everything else was kind of set in an idealized, you know, 1950s or 1960s. The show was about a guy who sells plots on the moon for this like housing, this big like housing complex, you know, luxury housing complex that they're building on the moon. It turns out that it's all fake. I can't remember what the name of the show is, but it reminded me very much of A Space Odyssey.
Well, guys, we have a very exciting opportunity here to ask some of our important questions to an all omniscient, all knowing, all powerful, mysterious creature. The Monolith from 2001 is here right now
I'm so excited.
to take some of my questions. Monolith, first, I just want to thank you so much for coming to be on our show. We know that you don't do a whole lot of interviews, that you're a very private object of eternal mystery. And so it really means a lot that you're
Thanks,
here.
mate. Thanks for having me on the show. It's good to be here. I've tried to stay out of the spotlight since the film came out, but I think it's time people acknowledge what we monoliths do for society, you know? Monolith
Sure.
awareness, man.
Monolith awareness, absolutely, absolutely. How about we start with, how did you meet Stanley Kubrick? And how did you get to be cast in one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time?
Well, I was shopping for blooming watermelons and I look up and who do I see? Some wild-eyed bastard staring back at me. Kind of creepy like, if I'm being honest. And I think to myself, Monolith, that's bloody Stanley Kubrick, thumping melons. He says he's making a new film, that I'd be perfect for a part, and that's it, man. That's all it took. Movie history, you know?
Fascinating. Well, 2001 is certainly your most famous role, but I think people would be interested to know that it's not the only job you've had. Can you tell us some more about what you've been up to since 2001 came out in 1968?
I had a part in Sense and Sensibility, but I got cut from the film. Ang Lee said the film was running too long, or some bullshit like that. So that was bollocks. After that, I did a few commercials, took up odd jobs, whatever I could to make ends meet. Sometimes people hire me to be a wall, to create shade for old people when they sit out in the sun. And that's meaningful work, you know? Makes me feel good to know some old twat isn't going to go sour in the sunlight because of me.
Oh, no. Oh, goodness, yeah, sour old twats. Nobody wants that, so we're thankful for your work there. I hope you don't mind if I ask you a few more really kind of timeless questions. And you don't have to say more than you feel comfortable, because I understand. But this is kind of a big one, and we're all keen to hear your answer. Is there a God? And if so, why are we here?
First, I can tell you there is a God. But he's really particular about what I can and can't say, you know? There's a confidentiality agreement somewhere, but I can tell you this. It's not about you. It's not about humans. It never was. It's about the worms.
The worms. Well, that's interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. All the big man ever wanted was to perfect the worms. And he accomplished that a long bloody time ago. Humans were just meant to feed the worms, and I've got to give you credit where credit is due, man. You do a great job feeding the worms. I've heard God say it.
So, I gotta say, this is a little hard to hear, that we're less significant in God's eyes than worms.
But you had to know God has a wicked sense of humour, didn't you? I mean, this is the guy who made the platypus put nipples on men and made Carrot Top a celebrity. Those are clues, mate.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about the worms. He's got big plans for them. But he's done with humans. He says he would have pulled the plug already, but the worms like eating you, so he keeps you around. They especially like the eyes and the genitals.
Ugh, oh my. Well, I gotta be honest, I don't think I was ready to hear some of these answers. It's quite a paradigm shift that you've laid on us tonight. But let me ask you one more question, if you don't mind. And it's another big one. I'm kind of bracing for it. What is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything?
42.
Right. Well, I think we better end the interview so we can sit with this information and digest it for a while. I want to thank the Monolith for coming on our show tonight. We appreciate your time, I think.
Hey man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And keep feeding those worms.